The other week, Season 6, the newest season of Black Mirror, released on Netflix, and as a long-time fan of the show, I actually thought this season was pretty good. It's not the best season of the show by far, but it's easily not the worst at all. But as I was watching some of the episodes, it did have me thinking, what has happened to Black Mirror, and how has it evolved since its humble beginnings back on Channel 4 in 2011? For those of you that maybe don't know, Black Mirror started off as a Channel 4 production. Channel 4, for anyone outside of the UK, is a TV channel in the UK that kind of emphasises itself on doing stuff that other channels don't, hence why Black Mirror was created. And during its run on Channel 4, we got 2 full seasons of 3 episodes each, as well as a Christmas special called White Christmas. And it was after that point that Channel 4 then decided to just axe it, for no reason whatsoever. Thankfully, about a year or so later, Netflix then picked up the rights to Black Mirror, and from that point on, Black Mirror became a Netflix property. And ever since then, the show has gained more and more popularity, way more so than it ever did on Channel 4. But the main thing this meant for the show as a whole is that now that Netflix were backing it, it meant that the show could explore bigger themes, bigger concepts, and also utilise a bigger budget for its episodes. And for the most part, with seasons 3 and 4, that seemed to be the case. We managed to get a nice blend of episodes that still felt like traditional Black Mirror, but there were also a lot of episodes that decided to push the boat out in terms of their scale and their concepts. During this period, we got episodes like Archangel and Shut Up and Dance that honestly could easily fit onto seasons 1 and 2 because they still fit within that real world, grounded, dark and gritty tone that the first 2 seasons had already kind of established. But then we also got episodes like Black Museum, USS Callister and San Junipero that felt like the same sort of thing, but they were trying to expand the concepts and scale of the show in the stories they were trying to tell. And for the most part, those sorts of episodes mostly succeeded. And then in 2018, we got Bandersnatch, which was the most experimental thing the show had ever done to that point. It was a feature-length film that was also an interactive choose-your-own-adventure style narrative. And again, this was something they definitely could not do on Channel 4, and was something that was only really doable through the interactive medium of something like Netflix. Even to this day, I still have a soft spot for Bandersnatch in terms of what it was trying to do and the way that it executed it. And yeah, it might have been a bit rough around the edges, and when you look back at it now, certain aspects do seem a little bit gimmicky, but I still really admire the experiment that they took and what they were trying to do and the way they tried to do it. And I genuinely think that the concept of it all really wouldn't have been as good as it was if it wasn't for the 2 main performances by Fionn Whitehead and Will Poulter, because those 2 especially really drive some of the moments that would otherwise kind of fall flat on their face if that concept wasn't executed as well as it was. And then after Bandersnatch, we got season 5, which was only 3 episodes long, which a lot of people were rather disappointed about. I personally didn't mind because that's the length of episodes they used to have back on Channel 4. And when the episodes were announced, I thought, oh, are they going to strip it back and go back to basics like they did on Channel 4? And they kind of didn't, but they did at the same time. Season 5 is a weird one for me to talk about, and it kind of explains why I've never done a video about it on this channel before. I reviewed season 3 and 4 when those came out, and I even talked about Bandersnatch very briefly in my Best of 2018 Films video. But season 5 was one of those seasons where I just really didn't feel like talking about it, and that's the first time I really got that with a season of Black Mirror. You had Striking Vipers, which had an interesting concept, but the overall execution of the episode left a bit to be desired. Then you had Me, You, and Ashley 2, which, as a standalone episode, I actually think it's rather enjoyable. It's not the most memorable Black Mirror episode ever, but for what it is, I actually had a lot of fun with it, and I think Miley Cyrus added a lot of humour to that episode that I thought was well needed. And then there was Smithereens, which I thought was fucking brilliant. I thought it was classic Black Mirror, doing what it does best, and it was just really, really well done. And I definitely think the performances in that episode elevated it to more than what it could have been if it was just handled by someone else. And when it comes to season 5, that's kind of it. Because there's only 3 episodes to go off of, it kind of feels like a mixed bag. Striking Vipers was very underwhelming. Me, You and Ashley 2 is fine on its own, but when you compare it to any other Black Mirror episode, it does feel very lackluster. And then you had Smithereens, which was incredible. And that mixed bag approach, on top of the fact that there's only 3 episodes to go of, kind of left a bit of a bad taste in a lot of people's mouths, myself included, because even though I didn't hate season 5, it definitely felt very, very underwhelming for what it was. It's been 4 years since season 5 came out, and in that time period, a lot of people have kind of moved on from Black Mirror a little bit, especially considering how lackluster season 5 left the fans of the show. Which leaves season 6 in a very strange position. They could have gone literally any route they wanted to for this season. They could have gone back to basics, like what they did with seasons 1 and 2. They could have really pushed the boat out and gone for some really grand, insane concepts with this season, or they could have just experimented a little bit. And what we got with season 6 was a bit of everything. Season 6 gives us 5 episodes to work with, and across those 5 episodes, we get a lot of stuff that we've kind of seen before in Black Mirror, but then again, there are other episodes where we get the usual Black Mirror stuff with an element that doesn't necessarily feel like Black Mirror. And it does feel a little bit refreshing, but at the same time does feel a little bit strange, especially when you're going into it expecting the usual sort of Charlie Brooker, Black Mirror sort of things. For example, the first episode of the season is called Joan Is Awful, and it's about this woman called Joan who starts to see her life played out exactly as it's happened, but as a Netflix drama where she is portrayed by Salma Hayek, and everyone, herself included, can see it. Now, when I was going into this season, this was the one I wasn't really expecting much from, but actually came away from it liking it a lot more than I did. It's actually one of my favourite episodes of season 6. And I think the reason it works so well is because it leans very heavily on humour. And that's something that Black Mirror has only done a couple of times, but not relied that heavily on, whereas Joan Is Awful really doubles down on the humour. It's not a straight up comedy, but it's definitely one of the funniest Black Mirror episodes we've had probably ever. Now, in terms of its concept and execution, this does feel like an episode that would easily fit into season 4 or season 5. Basically what I'm saying is that this feels like a regular Black Mirror episode in terms of the recent output we've got whilst they've been at Netflix. And then you get Lock Henry, which starts off feeling like an old school Black Mirror episode. And when the episode started, I was really on board with it. I'm like, okay, we're getting old school Black Mirror. It's going to be disturbing and dark, and it's going to make you regret your life choices by the end of it. And I was on board from it from the word go. But then as the episode went on, I was waiting for that technology aspect that you expect to see in any Black Mirror episode. And it never really came. I mean, yeah, there is a technological aspect to the episode in the sense that these two people are trying to make a documentary, so they're using camera equipment, etc. But outside of that, there isn't really a technology crux to the episode that makes it distinctly Black Mirror. And then when the ending happens, I just kind of thought to myself, this does feel more like a traditional crime thriller than it does a Black Mirror episode. That being said, it does kind of come full circle in the end with its mini twist where it really does go full Black Mirror and does feel like a kick in the nuts, like some of the best Black Mirror twists do. So that aspect I really liked. But as a whole, Lock Henry feels like it's setting you up with one thing, but then kind of delivers you something else. And when you go in with that mindset, you might appreciate the episode a bit more than if you go into it expecting old school Black Mirror, which is kind of what it sets up in the first place. Then you get Beyond the Sea, which is the episode everyone keeps raving about, and quite rightly so. It's probably up there with Joan Is Awful as one of my favourite episodes of this season. And again, this episode feels like a bit of a weird one in the sense that it doesn't use technology in the sense you would expect Black Mirror to use technology. This episode feels more like a standard sci-fi drama than it does a traditional Black Mirror episode. And again, if you go in expecting traditional Black Mirror, you might be disappointed. But about halfway through this episode, I realised what it was trying to do, and from that point on, I was on board with it. From the two lead performances by Josh Hartnett, and especially Aaron Paul, who kills it in this episode. Like, he deserves any and all awards he gets for this episode, because he is so unbelievably good. But on top of that, you have a very intriguing and intense character-driven drama that just intensifies the more the episode goes on. And again, there isn't necessarily a core technology aspect to the episode that really doubles down on the dark or traumatic side of the story. It's really just about technology being there to then emphasize the character dynamics of this story and to let the characters and the story itself just kind of shine through more than the technological aspect. And then, after Beyond the Sea, you then get Maisie Day, which is probably the worst episode of Black Mirror I've ever seen. Now, I try to keep this channel pretty positive as much as I can nowadays when I talk about films or TV shows. But Maisie Day is just so bad in so many different ways. It starts off really intriguing with this dual perspectives concept of the same story. You have this woman who is a member of the paparazzi who's just trying to make a living, and then you have this celebrity who's going on a downward spiral for a specific reason. And when those two were initially set up, I was really intrigued to see how they would interlock. But then as the episode went on, I kept thinking to myself, they're really kind of trying to stretch it here in terms of how they interlink. And then the final act happens, and it throws logic and everything out the window, and I'm still baffled as to how it got to that conclusion, because the final act went in a way that I wasn't expecting, and I don't mean that in a good way. It just felt very stupid and dumb, and I still don't understand what they were trying to go for just in general. Thankfully, the season does end on a high with Demon 79, which again just kind of removes any technological aspect you're expecting and just goes for a straight up horror comedy thriller vibe, which actually kind of works. The performances and the concept of this episode definitely are its strongest aspects, and this definitely does feel like an episode I would rewatch multiple times. It's not my favourite of the season, but in terms of what it delivered and the way it executed it, I can definitely see myself coming back to this one. So yeah, overall I think Season 6 is a massive improvement over Season 5, but it's definitely nowhere near as good as some of the previous seasons. I still think Black Mirror peaked with Seasons 3 and 4, which was the show at its fullest in terms of potential and what it was trying to do. But Season 6 definitely isn't awful by any means. If you've seen Season 6 of Black Mirror, then let me know what you think about it in the comments below. I'd love to have a chat in the comments about just Black Mirror in general. If you like the video, then give it a thumbs up and subscribe to the channel if you haven't done so already. Bye.